stopped. And so let's continue with the PowerPoint file from last time. And this is where we left off, right? So we talked about allomorphs, so this is where we left off. So there's one issue in the book that's called typology, right? Typology has to do with the study of different types, right? Typo or type, right? So grouping things into different classes, different types. And if you study morphology of the world languages, right? There are two major systems of morphology in world languages. There's what we call the synthetic language and also analytic language. Okay? So there are two major types of languages in this world. One is synthetic language, and the other one is analytic language. Okay? So the way we classify languages, the way we classify languages like this, have to do with different types of morphemes they have. Okay? So for a synthetic language, it's a language in which syntactic relations are expressed by inflectional morphemes rather than by word order. So meaning that examples are like Latin, German, and Korean. Okay? So in these languages, when you want to describe the relationships between content words, remember, and function words, you use different morphemes. You use inflectional morphemes. Remember, inflectional morphemes are like morphemes that do grammatical functions, such as plural, such as tense, such as comparison. Remember, inflectional morphemes. And in Korean, for example, you attach different morphemes at the end, okay, in order to indicate the relationship between things. And you don't use word order. Okay, I'll have examples later on. And the other type of language is called analytic language. Okay? Analytic language is a language where you indicate syntactic relationships by word order rather than by morphemes attached to words. Okay? So, for example, Thai, Chinese, or English to a great extent. So in English, we rely on word order, right? For example, I am in class, she is in the library. You indicate the relationship between I and class using in, for example. Okay? So in has a meaning in and of itself. For example, she's in the library. You indicate the relationship between she and the library using the word in. So in is a word. Okay? It's not a morpheme. But in Korean, you don't have a word like that. You have to attach it at the end of another word. Right? Tosokwan e so, for example, Tosokwan e. So you attach that to a word, to another word. But in English, the word in is just a word by itself. Okay? So English is, by and large, an analytic language. Whereas Korean and Latin, if you study Latin, you have to memorize a lot of inflectional endings. And Latin is an example of a synthetic language. Okay? And for synthetic languages, there are two more subgroups. Okay? For synthetic languages, you have agglutinative languages and also fusional languages. For agglutinative languages, you have several morphemes attached to a stem, and each morpheme has a specific meaning. So you can memorize the word glue. Glue is just like glue that you use to attach things together. Okay? And when you attach things, you can still see the kind of concrete boundary between things. When you glue things together, right, you see the concrete boundaries between things. So, for example, in Korean, 어디 가세요, like this. So you have ka, which is a verb. You have se, which is the honorific to give politeness to the listener. And you have yo, which is a polite marker. So each is one morpheme, and you glue them together, right? And you see the boundary. You can divide the boundary pretty well, right? Pretty concretely. 원내가 다니는 학교. So this is I, and then tani is a verb. Nun is like a present tense plus relative pronoun. The school that I go to, the school that I attend. So you attach this to this verb, and you modify it with 학교 like that. Okay? So you can pretty much draw the boundary between morphemes, right, when you glue them together. So that's what we call agglutinative languages. Okay? And there's another type of synthetic languages, which is called fusional languages. For fusional, you know the word fuse, right? Fuse is to combine things together, right? And for fusional languages, you don't see the morpheme. You cannot draw a concrete boundary between morphemes easily, okay? Because everything fuses together. So in Spanish, for example, if you look at all these different conjugations, we call them different conjugations of the same verb, hablar, to speak, okay? I speak is hablo. So you see that every word here has the root of habla, which is to speak. But when it comes to the first person, I speak, you only see the o, right? O here means I and also present tense at the same time. But the present tense meaning and the I meaning are fused together. You cannot divide O into half O and the other half. You cannot do that. So everything is fused into that O. You cannot draw the distinction between where is the tense and where is the person, where is I. And hablas is the same thing. As combines the meaning of the present tense and also you. So you cannot divide it to a and s. You cannot do that. Okay? And habla, same thing. He, she, or it, and present tense. All these meanings are fused together in a. So we call this type of language fusional language. Okay? So again, to summarize, we have two major types of languages. One is synthetic, where you use inflectional morphemes to indicate grammatical relationships like Latin, Spanish, German, and Korean. Okay? And you don't really rely on word order because the morphemes will tell you who is doing what to whom. But you have also what we call analytic languages in which you use word order, right? And each word means one thing. Okay? Each word is a word by itself, like that. Okay? And within the synthetic group, you have agglutinative and also fusional languages. Okay? For agglutinative languages, of which Korean is an example, you have several morphemes kind of stacked together, and you can tell what morpheme does what job. Okay? Ka, se, yo. You have three things, and you know the meaning of each thing. But for fusional languages, you cannot tell what O does, right? What part of the O that does the present tense meaning and what part of it does the I meaning. You cannot do that, okay? So there are two types, okay? So that's for typology, okay? Now let's move on to the last issue for morphology, and then we'll go on to syntax today. So for morphology, this is what we call morphological processes. Okay, I'll need to write this out for you. Morphological processes. Morphological processes. So, in other words, we are talking about word formation here. Remember, when we study phonology, we study phonological processes, right? Processes that would lead to sound changes, right? So now we are talking about morphological processes, processes that would lead to word formation. So how do we form words in different languages and also in English? That's what we are going to talk about now, okay? So the first method is what we call coinage, okay? To coin a word or to create a word is just to create a totally new word that never existed in the language before. This is a totally new word, okay? We don't use any, we don't reuse any morphemes or anything like that for this method. So for this method, you can do this by two ways. Branding. You use trade names as general terms, such as Kleenex. Kleenex is a trade name for facial tissue, like that. So give me some Kleenex, please, right? Like that. Okay. Google. Can you Google something? Like that. Google is a name, right? And FedEx is the name of the carrier. For example, can you FedEx this for me tonight? Like that. Zipper. Can you zip up like that? Zipper is also a name. Aspirin is also a trade name. Used to be a trade name, but now we use it to represent the type of medicine that deals with fever and headache and pain, like that. Okay, so all of these used to be trade names or proper names. Okay, or eponym. Eponym is more or less the same as branding, but in this case, you use a person's or a place name as a word, as in sandwich, right? Sandwich is from the Earl of Sandwich, like that, who invented sandwich. Jeans is from a place name like Genoa in Italy, right, where this type of fabric was first manufactured, like that. Or watt, the unit of power, right? When we talked about electricity, in this case, it's from James Watt, like that. So you coin new words by using people's name or brand names. Okay, so that's the first way. And the next method is borrowing. Okay, we can borrow words from a different language and use them as words in our language. Okay, and this happens because of language contact. Throughout the history of English, English has been in contact with so many languages like Latin, like French, like Italian, and so on. So we borrow a lot of words from those languages, words that we don't have, we didn't have before. We didn't use those words to describe some concepts or some things, so we have to borrow those words. So croissant, for example, is a type of bread, right? Half moon bread, like that. Okay? And when we domesticate it, we might use the word as it is, like croissant, or some people might say crescent roll, to make it more English-like. So crescent roll. So crescent is like half moon, not half moon, or partially a part of the moon, like that. Okay? Croissant or piano from Italian, pretzel from German, or skunk, which is a type of animal that's found in the US. Okay, so we borrow that from American Indian languages, like that. Okay, and most of our high register terms, for example, words like let me see, words like royal, like this, is from Latin. This one is from French. But for a native English word, it's like kingly. So we tend to use Latinate words or French words when we talk about high register stuff, okay? Like formal, informal context, like that. We would use royal. But this has the same meaning, but it's native English. Okay, native English terms. And there are a lot of pairs like this, and I'll show you a list of like native English terms and also French and Latin terms when we come across, when we go to the history of English. Okay? So borrowing is the second method. And why do we borrow words? One thing is because it's prestige, right? When we borrow a word, we might sound like we are educated, especially if we use Latinate terms, for example. And we might borrow a word because we just didn't have that word before to describe an innovation, to describe an object that didn't exist before. So it might be due to need, on a need basis, or because of the prestige that we borrow words. Okay? And the next method is compounding. When you compound words, you just put two words together, okay, to make a new word, meaning that you reuse, right? You reuse the words that you already have. And sometimes when you put words together, you get a new meaning, but sometimes you just get a combined meaning of the two words. So for example, greenhouse is not a house that's green, but it's a construction where you keep young plants in a controlled condition, right? Or bookworm is not a worm that is in a book, but it describes a person who reads a lot like that, who enjoys reading like that. Copycat is not a cat that is a copy of another cat, but is someone who tries to imitate, right? An action, typically bad action, like murder, like that. Cowboy chairman is not a man who is a chair, but a man who sits at the, who presides over a meeting, like that. So for all of these words, you get somewhat new meaning, and you cannot really guess as to what the meaning is going to be. But for other compounds, you get a combined meaning out of the parts. Like fruitcake, like type of cake that has fruit in it, handshake, newspaper, quicksand, or sleepwalk. Okay, so compounding is really a very productive, productive. We use this method a lot in modern English. Okay, compounding is a very productive method. And the next type is called blending. Blending is compounding plus clipping, okay? Meaning that you cut, clipping is to cut. You cut or you clip part of a word, and you clip another part, and then you join them together. Like smog is smoke and fog. So you cut the SM from smoke, and you cut the OG from fog, and you combine them together, okay? Motel, motor, and hotel, like that. Brunch, breakfast, and lunch. You cut the BR and then UNCH from the other word. So that's called blending. And clipping is the next method. Clipping is an example of reduction where a word is clipped or cut from another word. So in other words, it's like abbreviated, right, of sorts. Abbreviation of sorts. Fax from facsimile, ad or advert from advertisement, cab or taxi from taximeter, cabriolet, depending on which of these two words that you want to cut from. Taxi or cab, both are the same. Perm is from permanent wave, flu, influenza, fan, fanatic, for example. Okay, so you clip or you cut from the whole word. Okay. And back formation is the next type. For back formation, you create a word, typically a verb, out of a noun, okay? Normally we would create a noun out of a verb, right? So you would think that television comes from televise plus un, but it's not like that. Because television is the origin of televise. So people think that, well, we have television, so we see the ION at the end. So this must be that we attach some noun suffix to it. So there must be a verb to televise. And televise is created out of television, like that, rather than the other way around. Or donation, that's the origin of the word donate, right? Normally we would have donate to donation. Normally it would go that way. But for back formation is backward forming, right? Or option is reduced to opt, like that. I could opt for, like that, to choose, like that, okay? But the origin is option. Opt as a verb never existed before the coinage of option, like that, okay? So this is called back formation. And conversion. Conversion is to use the same word, but in a different part of speech function, okay? So what used to be a noun can become a verb. Like, have you buttered the toast? So butter used to be a noun, for example. Now it has become a verb, okay? Can you FedEx this for me? FedEx used to be a noun, right? Now it's a verb. They are vacationing in Seoul, from the noun vacation, like that. So it's the same word, but you use it for another function. And coming along to acronym. Acronym is when you coin a new word by using just the initial letters, okay? For example, where's the ATM machine? ATM comes from automatic teller machine, like that. So The word ATM is a new word, right? But we got it from the initials of automatic teller machine, like that. Or the PIN number, personal identification number, from that, okay? Or laser treatment. We usually think of laser as a word, right? But in fact, it comes from light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. So very long, right? And we get just the initials of each, right? LASER, like that. But we think of laser as a word. But in fact, it came from this long noun phrase, this long compound, right? This long compound noun, right? Light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. That's a long compound noun. Right? And finally, we have derivation or affixing. It's a productive way to get a new word, right? We get a new word by affixing, either giving it a prefix or giving it a suffix, okay? Happy, we get unhappiness by adding ness and un, like that. We get a new word. Or care, we get carelessness from care plus less plus ness, for example. So this is another productive method. The most productive methods are, I think, compounding and also derivation or affixing in modern English. Okay? And so that's it for the morphology chapter. Okay? Last week, there was a handout on morphology that we finished all, but there was one question that we didn't get to answer because this is the part that we just study now. Okay? So let's look at this one and go through it together. This is on the last page of morphology. So I give you two columns. I give you column A and column B. Okay? And the column B is the origin, okay? The original word or the history of the word for column A. So let's see what type of morphological processes happened in these words. Okay? Stagflation, for example, A1. Stagflation comes from stagnation, to be still, right? To stand still. And inflation, okay, a type of economic situation. So this one is blending, right? So we have blending. Because you have stag plus inflation, right? You cut or you clip and then you combine. Cut, clip, and compound. Okay, so it's blending. Number two, nostril. Nostril is from the Old English word nosu and thrill. Nosu is nose and thrill is hole. Okay? Nose hole, in other words, nostril is nose hole. So this type of word creation, word formation is nosu plus hole. Thrill is hole. You get nostril. You have two words, right? And two words already exist, right, in the language. Nose and hole. Thrill means hole, okay? So nose hole, nose thrill. This is compounding, right? Compounding is the mixing of two or three words that already exist, right? Next one is van, right? A van is from caravan, right? Caravan, right? In this case, you just take this one, right? Take this part from it. So it's clipping. Right? Van is a truck-like vehicle, right? Next one is CD, right? Compact disc, CD-ROM, for example, compact disc. So you pronounce it as CD. We call this acronym, right? Acronym. Televise is a verb from television. Usually it's the other way around, right? It would be the other way around. But in this case, you have television first, and then you cut off the ISON. So we have a verb televise. This one is back formation. Correct. Number 6 is scuba diving, right? Scuba diving. But scuba itself comes from self-contained underwater breathing apparatus. So we have self-contained underwater breathing apparatus. So this is again acronym. Last one we have deli, right? Deli, and from delicatessen, okay? Delicatessen, which is like a store or a counter in a supermarket that sells food products that you need little preparation, like ham, salad, like that. So in this case, it's clipping, right? Okay. So if I give you the newly created words and I give you the history, you should be able to tell me what type of word formation these words undergo, okay, on the exam. So any questions? So I'll show this until. If no question, then let's move to syntax. Okay, syntax. So this is a new chapter, and half of the chapter will be on the midterm exam. Okay, so we'll just only talk about half of the chapter, and then you will be responsible for phonetics, phonology, morphology, and half of syntax, okay, for the midterm exam. For syntax, half of the chapter will deal with how to identify word classes, how to identify phrases, and phrase structure rules. Okay, we'll study these all today. Okay, syntax is not difficult because it's not as abstract as phonology or phonetics or morphology. Okay, so what is syntax? Syntax or grammar, right? Another name for syntax is grammar, right? Syntax is the study of the structure of phrases and sentences, right? We study each sound, right? How to produce each sound, how to combine sounds, that's phonology. And then we study words and parts of words, right? And that's morphology. Now we'll put words together. When you put words together, you form a bigger chunk, which is called phrase, right? A bigger chunk of words is a phrase. And then when you have so many phrases together, you have sentences, okay? And we'll study the rules that govern how words are combined to form phrases and sentences. That's grammar or syntax, okay? And for example, the lucky boys, this is a grammatical phrase, okay? This is a grammatical phrase, the lucky boys. But it's not possible to say you see the asterisk or the stars. Stars meaning not possible. Boys, the lucky, that's not grammatical. Or lucky boys, the, not grammatical. Why? Right? So there must be some rules that allow the lucky boys, but those rules do not allow boys the lucky or lucky boys the. Okay? There must be some underlying rules. Okay? Or I have 2 cats at home. That's perfectly fine, but have cats 2 home at I. That's not fine. There must be some rules that underline the formation, the creation of that sentence. So that's the study of syntax. We'll try to figure out what rules underlie these grammatical phrases and sentences. And these rules are acquired at a very young age and internalized into the brain, meaning that native speakers of a particular language, they know the rule unconsciously, but they cannot explain formally what these rules are. So it's the responsibility of a linguist or a syntactician to discover these rules. Okay? And when second language learners learn these rules, it's different from when first language learners learn the rule. Because when second language learners do it, it's usually conscious rules. So when you study English, you guys, for example, you are told as to where to put the subject, where to put the verb, where to put the object. So that's a conscious rule, right? But when native speakers learn it, then it's unconscious, and they cannot explain, but they can form grammatical sentences. And when we talk about learning languages, it's not learning by memorization. Memorization doesn't work. At least when we talked about first language acquisition, because a person, a native speaker, can say things that he or she has never heard before or had never read before. So if learning is by memorization, how could he or she form new sentences that he or she has never heard before or has never seen written down before? So language is not learned by memorization when it comes to first language learning at least. Okay? And the rules are limited in number. We say that grammar rules are limited in number, and you can, but the final products are unlimited. You can keep creating novel sentences, okay, using just the limited rules. Okay? We'll study what these rules are, okay, today. Now, before we study underlying rules that enable people to create new sentences, new phrases, we have to talk about word categories first, because I will refer to this as a noun, something as a verb. Then you need to know what a noun is and what a verb is first, right? So word categories. And we'll talk about nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs first, okay, before we talk about other things. And if you remember, to categorize words into classes, there's one way to do it, which is by using whether the criterion of whether it's an open class or a closed class. Okay? For open class words, they include nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. Okay? Open class meaning you can add new nouns into the language. Remember, for example, by branding, by eponyms, by compounding, you can keep adding new nouns or new verbs into the language, right? Or new adjectives or new adverbs into the language. That's why we call this group the open class group, okay? But on the other hand, you have the closed class group, which includes prepositions, determiners, modals, auxiliaries, and complementizers. And you cannot add new prepositions into the language, or you cannot add new determiners into the language. So that's why we call this whole group the closed class group. Okay? And they are function words because they only do grammatical functions. And they don't express ideas, at least not like concrete ideas like nouns, like verbs, or adjectives, or adverbs. So there are two major classes. And we'll study the open class group first. Okay? For nouns, how do we tell what word is a noun and what word is not a noun, right? The traditional grammar definition of a noun is the name of a person, place, or thing, right? That's the traditional grammar description. But there are problems, okay? There are many problems with that traditional definition, because words like beauty is not a person, it's not a place, right? And it's not a thing. How do you define a thing, right? And translation is not a person, place, or thing, right? Or agreement is not really a person, place, or thing. Or arrival is not a person, place, or thing. Some people might argue that thing includes abstract things, right? But how do we define abstractness, and so on, right? So you have to redefine the word thing, in other words, right? But there are other ways of determining that these are nouns, okay? We'll study those ways, okay? And the criteria that we'll use include morphological criteria and also distributional criteria, meaning where they can be found. Okay? So for nouns, the morphological criteria include, you will see some derivational suffixes. Remember derivational suffixes? Suffixes that usually, although not always, change the part of speech of a word. So when you add ness, to an adjective, you get a noun. Kind is an adjective. You add ness, you get kindness, which is a noun, like that. So whenever you see whenever you see the morpheme ness, you know that you have a noun. You don't need to ask a question, okay? Because ness is a noun only suffix, like that. Whenever you see iti, it's a noun only suffix, okay? Availability, iti is always a noun without you having to think. Television, shan is always a noun without you having to think, like that, okay? Or some other inflectional suffixes, right? Plural, when you pluralize a noun, you add s or es, right? That's the only plural suffix that could be attached to nouns. You cannot attach that to a verb, okay? So plural indicates that a word is a noun. And possessive also indicates that a word is a noun, because only it must be a thing, right, that you can possess. So apostrophe s is also a clue telling you that, well, what you have in front of it is a noun, okay? So these are morphological criteria, meaning whenever you see ness, iti, an, and other suffixes like al, arrival, al is also a noun suffix. And whenever you see an s ending which has the plural meaning or apostrophe s, then you know that you have a noun. You don't have to ask a question of whether it's a place, is it a person, is it a thing, whenever you see these suffixes. And the second criteria have to do with the distribution, meaning places you can find nouns, okay? The places you can find noun include this sequence. That is a determiner, adjective, and the noun. So whenever you see that sequence, the last thing is a noun. Like the late arrival of the Romans. You see the determiner, which is the, right? Adjective is late, and in noun is arrival. Okay? So whenever you see that sequence, the noun can be identified. And her kindness is appreciated. Kindness is a noun because it falls into that sequence. The reason I have the parentheses here is that and adjective are optional. Okay? So sometimes you don't have the adjective like her kindness, right? Her big kindness, like that. So it's gone. Okay? And we'll talk about what is a det, what is a determiner, maybe 10 minutes later. Okay? And it can fit this pattern, an excellent blank. Okay? You can say excellent kindness, like that, excellent arrival, like that. So if you can stick a noun in question in there and it fits that pattern, then you have a noun. Okay? And nouns occur after a preposition. No other words can, like that. Okay? Despite is a preposition, as regards is a preposition. Okay? So you have, for nouns, you have some suffixes that tell you, and you have some distributional locations that would give you a clue as to the nominal nature of a word. Okay? Now let's look at verbs. The traditional definition of verbs is that a verb is a word that expresses action or being, right? Action is like having some dynamic quality to it, and being, the state of being, right? But if you look at these words like mean, as in what do you mean? Like what do you mean by saying that? What do you mean? Mean is not action or is not being. So this traditional definition would fail to capture the word mean, right? The verbal quality of the word mean. Or comfortable is a state of being, and yet it's not a verb. So there's a problem with that traditional expression definition. Angry is a state of being as well, but but it's not a verb like that. Okay. So loathe, for example, is your emotional feeling, right? Your feeling, but it doesn't get included in the definition, and yet it's a verb. So the traditional definition has a problem. Then we need some other criteria to help us. And the first type of criteria, again, has to do with morphology, right? Morphology of verbs. And you can use suffixes to tell you that a word is a verb. For example, when you see ify, ice, ate, or en, right? We studied en last time. En, when you attach to an adjective like dark, darken, when you see these suffixes, you know that you have verbs. Okay? And verbs will have the present tense ending with s, right? S or es. This is not the same as nouns, right? For nouns, the s or es have to do with plural, right? The fact that it's a plural. But for verbs, it has to do with the fact that it's a present tense singular, right? And with the past tense morphemes, right? Ed, which could be pronounced as t, d, or it, right? And only verbs have tense, right? Only verbs. Nouns do not have tense. So you can use all these criteria, suffixes as your clues, right? And for distributional criteria, they include the fact that verbs can appear after modals. We'll talk about modals, like can, could, shall, should, may, might, will, would, like that. No other words can, okay? He may come tomorrow at noon. So come is a verb because it can occur after may. Notice that you cannot insert a noun there, like he may kindness. It doesn't work. He may arrival. Doesn't work. It must be he may arrive, like that. So whenever you see modals, things after modals are usually verbs, okay? And should fit the pattern. David can arrive, David can talk about it, David can come tomorrow. Should fit that pattern. So whenever you are in doubt about whether a word is a verb or a noun, just fix it in there. David can arrive, David will arrive, like that. Instead of David will arrival, like that, okay? So these are tests. Think of this as tests for nouns or for verbs, okay? The next criteria has to do with adjectives. So adjectives have to do with words that modify a noun or a pronoun, right? But usually that criteria would work, okay? Usually that criteria works. But there are some problems like chocolate cake, okay? The word modifies a noun also, but chocolate is not an adjective like that. Coffee cup modifies cup, but it is not an adjective. Or we found her dead. Dead is an adjective, but it doesn't modify anything like that. So the traditional definition is, again, insufficient to screen adjectives from other words, right? To filter out. So we need some other criteria. For example, morphology. Morphology of adjectives can be recognized by looking at some suffixes like us, ous, full, like awful, like that, okay? Beautiful, like that. Or al as fungal, special, or ent, like different, like that. So whenever you see these suffixes, you know that you have an adjective, okay? Or inflectional suffixes, remember, like comparative er or superlative est, brightest, smartest. These are only adjective suffixes. Nouns cannot have these suffixes. Er for nouns, like teacher, that has nothing to do with comparison. So it's a different morpheme, okay? After more or most is another clue that tells you that you have an adjective, like more beautiful, more handsome, like that. Okay? And for distributional criteria, the adjective usually is positioned between determiner and a noun. Like determiner here is the, and the noun is boy or thing. If you can fit a word there, then it's usually an adjective, right? The big boy, the American boy, like that. The nice boy, like that, okay? If you can fit the word in there, it should be an adjective, okay? Or it could be placed after a be verb or a linking verb, like David or that thing seems wonderful, seems beautiful, like that, seems awful, like that, seems kind, is kind, like that. So put a word in there, right? So use this as your diagnostic test for adjectives, okay? That thing seems arrival, it doesn't work, right? So it must be an adjective, okay? Now, finally, we come to the last content word type, which is what we call adverbs, okay? Adverbs are typically related to adjectives because adverbs are built or adverbs are created out of adjectives, and you just add, typically you add the ly, the morpheme ly to adjectives like beautiful to beautifully, like that. So the formula seems to be adjective plus ly. So ly is a derivational suffix, right? And so you can use it as a clue when you see ly, a word that ends in ly. You usually have an adverb, but not all the time, maybe 98% of the time, okay? And for the distributional clues, you could use this formula or this diagnostic test. David did so beautifully, did so awfully, like that, did whatever, okay? But be careful, there are some adverbs that look like adjectives, like fast, you don't have fastly, right? So fast could be an adverb or adjective, you have to do the test, okay? David did so fast, you can do that. David drove fast, like that. And you have a fast train, the fast train, for example. So fast could fit both tests, right? Could pass both diagnostic tests. So you say that fast could be both adjective and both an adjective and an adverb, like that. Hard is also an adjective and an adverb, right? You have hardly, but the meaning is different, right? Hardly meaning seldom or rarely, right? Purely, like that. So hard by itself, which means like 열심히, like that. It is an adverb, not hardly, okay? Early could be an adjective or an adverb, okay? And cowardly could be an adjective or an adverb also. So we just took care of the content word type, right? And the open class type. Now let's look at the closed class type. The closed class group includes determiners. For these subtypes, you don't need to do any test because you don't have more members being added to the group. So they are limited in numbers, and you should be able to recognize them readily. Okay? Like determiners. Determiners, what they do is to determine nouns in terms of ownership, proximity, quantity, specificity. So there are only 4 groups of determiners, like ownership, his, her, my, your, their, our, or its. So they determine nouns in terms of who owns what. Like my car, for example. My determines who owns the car, right? Your car, your determines who owns the car. Or proximity, you call these demonstrative determiners. This and that, this is close, right? This pen. But when you refer to the pen here, you have to say that pen because it's further away from you than from me. It's close to me. So I use this, and that is for further away objects, right? These for close reference, but those for far away reference, but just for plural. Quantity, or you call them quantifiers, some, much, few, a few, little, most, all. So these words have to do with whether you have a lot or just a little, right? They have to do with numbers, right? Including 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that, or first, second, third. All of these are quantity related, okay? And specificity, like the or a or an, the is for definite, right? Definite meaning you specify which one. I know the boy, you know which boy, like that. I know a boy, a doesn't specify anyone. So a lot of these are determiners. Determiners only, okay, determiners only occur with nouns. Determiners determine noun. So they have to go with nouns, okay? They don't go with other things, okay? So that's why when we go back to nouns, we can use determiners as one clue that tells us which word is a noun, because determiners always go with nouns, right? Although they are not required to do so. Right? Preposition indicate positions or locations. So they indicate some spatial, meaning position, physical relationship between nouns, right? Between two nouns. And things like up, around, about, below, under, back, front, at, on, in, toward, all of these are prepositions, okay? And they are perhaps one-syllable words or maybe at most two-syllable words, right, that you can see. And these are what we call simple prepositions. And there are also complex prepositions like despite, in spite of, with respect to, notwithstanding. These are more we call them complicated or complex prepositions because they are longer, and they do not necessarily indicate the place or physical location of things, so we call them complex prepositions, and yet they are prepositions. And they are just only limited in numbers, right? And you know that the only type of word that can follow a preposition is a noun, right? We talked about that before. Like up the tree, around the house, about the school, below the third floor, like that, under the table, under the chair. Only nouns can follow prepositions. Other words cannot, right? Upon arrive, you cannot say that. You have to say upon arrival, right? Arrival is a noun. And auxiliaries and modals. Auxiliary and modals are special. They are special types of verbs, and they are called helping verbs because they help the main verb to show some aspects of meaning, like she was lied to. Lied is the main verb. Was is a helping verb that helps indicate that she is the person being acted upon, like that, the passive voice, like that. David is eating soup right now. Is here helps the main verb is to indicate that the action is ongoing, is still going on, like that. So we call them helping verbs, right? Because without them, we can still make grammatical sentences like David eats soup, like that. But with the help of is, right, we can indicate that the activity is ongoing. A modal is like an auxiliary. A modal helps express the meaning of the main verb but does not change the form. But the auxiliary does change the form, right? David is, I am eating, like that. But modals do not change their form, right? You may, he may, I may. Doesn't matter, right? I can't play, it will rain. They will do this. So modals do not change the form. And each type is only limited in number, so you should be able to readily recognize them. And the last type is called complementizer. A complementizer, this might be new to you. A complementizer introduces a subordinate clause, right? Subordinate meaning not the main clause, right? So she believes that John loves her. The word that here introduces that this is a clause, but it's not as big clause as this. So she believes it's the main clause, and John loves her is the subordinate clause. You need something to introduce it, which is the word that, okay? Or this is the book, and then she likes the book, right? So that introduces the subordinate clause of she likes, like that, okay? And the word that here is different from the word that you use in determiner, like that man will never leave, okay? The determiner that goes with man, okay? But this complementizer goes with a subordinate clause or a sentence. Okay, we already talked about, in the first hour, we talked about different criteria, right, to help us determine or to help us identify part of speech or word categories. Okay. Now we'll try to apply those criteria to words that I underlined in this poem by Lewis Carroll. Okay. And you might notice that these words are nonsensical words, meaning that they are not really meaningful. Okay. But this exercise is a good practice exercise for us because we don't need to know, right? When we talked about identifying word classes, we never talked about meanings, right? And it's possible to identify word classes without knowing the meaning, right? So that's why I have brought in this exercise, practice exercise for you. So everyone has got a handout, right? So there are 10 words in here that I underlined, okay? And what we'll do is I'll give you perhaps 5 minutes, okay, to identify the category. Like number 1, really here is a or and. Noun, verb, adjective, or adverb, right? Because these are the 4 classes that we need to identify. And give me the reason. Why do you think so? Okay? Is there any suffix that tells you that it's a noun, like that? Or what about the distributional position? Where does it occur, like that? Okay. So use the category, use the criteria that we already studied today. Okay. So I'll need then 10 people to give me the answers for this. I'll give you perhaps 5 to 7 minutes to think about it. And I have some cookies for you guys if you volunteer. Okay. So which item you want to choose, it's up to you. Okay. So I'll give you 5 to 7 minutes, and I'll walk around to help you to identify the part of speech. Right. Now, who would like to volunteer? You can pick any of these items. Who would like to volunteer? You can pick any of these, or else I will call on people and you cannot choose. So, who would like to volunteer? Larissa? Choose whichever item you want. Number 8. So let's look at number 8. Yes. Number 8, we have frumious, right? 8, where is 8? 8 here is an adjective because of the suffix OUS, right? So that's one clue that you can use. Also look at the position of this thing. The, which is the determiner. So you have this one, frumious, and also this should be a noun, right? So we have dead, adjective, and noun. So you have 2 clues, right, to tell you. So it seems that the plus adjective plus noun. So it fits that pattern. So it seems that we are almost certain, right, maybe 99% that this word frumious must be an adjective, right? Okay. So thank you. So anyone else would like to try? Yes. So pick whichever. Money to sale. Number 9. Which one is that? Yes, number 9, Walpole, right? I don't know the meaning, and it's not in the dictionary, I don't think. So what is it? Because? Yes. So number 9 is likely to be an adjective because of the suffix al. Okay. Be careful, the al can also be a suffix for nouns, right? As in arrival, approval, like that. But here, al could also be an adjective suffix. But if you notice, if you note the position, again, it fits that pattern, right? Determiner, which is his, Walpole, and sword, right? So in this case, we have two clues that agree, right? So we are quite sure that Volpo must be an adjective like that. Okay. Number 4, mimses, right? Why is it a noun? Or is what kind of word? Remember things that have to do with numbers. Numbers, all is a determiner, right? So numbers are determiners, right? So all is a determiner, and then what? You have mimses after all, right? So it's just like that pattern that we just saw, right? Determiner, adjective, and noun. But in this case, there's no adjective. An adjective is optional, we know. So all is a determiner, and a determiner goes together with a noun. So mimses must be a noun because it is after a determiner. And also, you see the es ending, right? The es ending is a plural ending, isn't it? The plural ending only goes with a noun, right? And why do you know that it's a plural? Because you see the word were, right? Like all boys were, like that. All girls were. So you have two criteria. You have two clues to tell you. So number 4 is a noun because of the es plural ending and also after a determiner. All, right? After the determiner all. A noun, number 6 is also a noun because it's after a determiner. In this case, it's after the determiner the, right? You cannot have a verb after a determiner for sure, right? Because the determiner cannot occur by itself. It must occur together with a noun always, okay? Number 3 is also a noun, okay? Because of the same reason, for the same reason. So noun because it's after the determiner the, like that. Okay? So we have 2, 5, 7, and 10 left. So who would like to? Yes.
Number 7.
7.
Yep.
Rats. What is it?
It is verb because in front of 7, it is acting third subject person.
Yeah. So the mom is a noun, right?
Yep.
And then, so what follows a noun, subject noun should be a verb, right? So 7 could be a verb because it's after a subject, right? A nominal subject like that. And also we guess that the s there is a present tense ending, right? Present tense singular ending, right? Just like David goes outside like that, right? So we would guess that rats here is a verb, okay? Noun after determiner, the, and the plural ending. Okay. So anyone else? Yes. Because okay, so that makes sense. But then how would you account for the next one? How would you account for the word toves? Because you can argue, right? You can argue that slithy must be a noun, right? Because it's after the determiner the, which is correct, right? But then how would you account for turfs? If you say the slithy is a noun, then this must be a verb, right? The slithy is like moves. For example, the slithy moves. And then if this is a verb, then how would we account for did, jeer, and jimbo? How do we account for that? Like the monster moves. Did, jeer, gear, and jimbo. It doesn't make sense, right? To have, if this is a verb, to have another verb here, right? So while your assumption is correct by itself, the slithy could be a noun. But when you look at the next word, right, it must be a verb to make sense, right? To make your hypothesis correct, turf must be a verb. But when you continue reading did, jeer, and jimbo, this must be a verb, right? So it doesn't make sense to have two verbs together. So that hypothesis is not likely to be right. But then we have to back up and say that perhaps slithy might be a noun. Oh, I'm sorry, not. The slithy might be an adjective, right? Because you say that it's a noun. The slithy might be an adjective that modifies turf, right? The big, the slimy monsters, did, jeer, and jimbo. That would make sense, right? So number 2, we would say that is an adjective because it fits the pattern of the plus adjective plus noun, right? And after that, you have the verb, did, gear, and jimbo, like that, okay? Right? Number 10 is likely to be an adjective because of the same reason. The plus adjective plus foe. You know, foe is a noun, which means enemy, like that, right? So the bad enemy, the violent enemy. So mensome should be an adjective, okay? So this is an adjective because it fits the pattern of the plus adjective plus noun, like that, okay? So this practice exercise shows you that you don't really need to know the meaning, right? The meaning of a word in order to classify the type, right? You just have to look at some suffixes and some distributional criteria, some distributional clues to tell you, okay? So this will come in handy when you have to make decision as to how to label phrases. Should it be an adjective phrase? Should it be a noun phrase, like that, okay? Now, to move on, we have about 10 minutes left. So to move on, now you are able to identify word classes, right? Especially the content word classes. Now, the next thing is that to recognize phrases, you can recognize words. Now, you should be able to recognize phrases. Or another term for it is constituent, okay? A phrase or a constituent means that words that go together, okay? Words seldom occur by themselves, okay? They rarely occur by themselves, but they tend to occur with other words, okay? And these words have a close relationship with each other. So they go as a group, okay? They go in groups, okay? And we call this group of words a constituent or a phrase, okay? So there's this example on this slide. The cat with a long fluffy tail detested the smell of citrus fruits, like this, okay? And you'll see that some words go together, okay? Like the cat, right? You have a determiner and the noun cat, they go together like that. A long fluffy tail, that goes together, right? All of them go together as a group. And then citrus fruits go together, okay? Citrus and fruits go together like that, okay? And some words do not go, like with and citrus, they do not go together, okay? As a chunk, okay? Cat with, they don't go together. The word cat and the word with, they don't go together, right? But the cat and then a long fluffy tail like that, or with a long fluffy tail. But cat and with do not go together, Okay, so words that go together, we call them, they go in chunks, right? In constituents. Okay, and we need to recognize constituents because constituents are phrases, and we need to know the structure of phrases in order to build a sentence. So one way to recognize a constituent or a group of words or a phrase is that you have to do substitution tests. Okay? And you replace the phrase in question with the different words depending on what type of phrase you think it is. So if you think that constituent, that group is a noun phrase, okay, meaning that you have a phrase whose category is noun, right? Put in a pronoun like he, she, or it, okay, or him or her, because a pronoun is the same as a noun phrase. So if you are able to put in he, she, it, or her, or him, then you have a noun phrase. Okay? If you think that the constituent is a verb phrase, put in the word did or did it. Okay? I'll show you some examples. Did it is a phrase. Okay? If you think that a constituent is an adjective phrase, put in so too. Like I am so, I am too, like that. I'm tired. Oh, I am so, I am too, like that. I'm tired too, like that. If you think that a constituent is a preposition, put a phrase there or here. Okay, so these are different tests. So let me show you. So now, looking at the example sentence here. The little boy from next door fed the cat without a tail. Okay, now I underline only the little boy. Okay? The little boy by itself can be a phrase because you can say he, okay, by itself, in isolation. It is a phrase, it is a constituent. But based on this example, this is not a phrase in and of itself. Because if you substitute the little boy with he, you get he from next door, okay? Because I only underline here, and you want to substitute the little boy with he, right? And you will find that the result is not acceptable. You cannot say he from next door fed her, right? So in this case, the little boy by itself is not a phrase, okay, based on this example. And then the cat, you can substitute it with her, like fed her without a tail. So just the cat is not a phrase in this particular example. Okay. On the other hand, let me compare. On the other hand, if I do this, if I do this, the cat was big. Okay? And I underline the cat. You substitute it with he, she, or it, doesn't matter. Does it work? So the result would be he, she, or it was big. Does it work to refer to the cat? It works, right? So he was big, the cat was big, she was big. Cat is one constituent, right? Because it passes that test. But the sentence, based on the sentence on the slide there, the cat by itself is not a phrase. On the other hand, if I underline the whole thing, the cat without a tail, right? Fed her, fed him, him or her referring to a cat without a tail, that would work. Okay? So based on this sentence, the phrase has to be the cat without a tail, not just the cat. Okay? Or based on this sentence, the little boy from next door is one phrase, is one noun phrase, like that. Because if I underlined the whole thing, I would get the little boy from next door, and you can say easily, he fed the cat without a tail. So it depends on what you have, right? When we analyze sentences, we have to look at the local context, the local phrases, not just any phrase in isolation. Just like this one, okay? So this one, the little boy from next door is one phrase. In that sentence is one phrase, okay? One big phrase, one big constituent. And then the cat without a tail is another constituent. Or these black cats detest those green peas. I underline only black cats, and I substitute the black cat with, let's say, them or they. These they doesn't work. It's not acceptable. So black cat, just black cats is not a constituent. You have to include the word these. Remember, these is a determiner, right? So determiner must go with a noun. So the whole thing here, these black cat is one constituent. Okay, it's one group here. Okay, you cannot just take out, you cannot leave out the word these. Okay, or green peas as well. You have to include the word those because a determiner goes with a noun always. Okay, put it over the table. You might think that, well, this must be a prepositional phrase, and then you put in the word here or there, put it there. So it's a prepositional phrase like that. So it's a phrase, okay? Put it over the table that's by the door, and I underline here, right? And we want to see whether this underlined group is a constituent or not. I just put in the word there, substitute it with the word there. Put it there, that's by the door. Doesn't work, okay? It's not grammatical. So that underlined chunk is not a constituent, right? So some members might not go together, or you might leave out some important members, okay? John will write a book. I underline will write a book, and then I underline write a book, and you think that that's a verb phrase, a verb constituent, then just put do so, like, and Mary will do so, like that. So it works. So write a book is a verb phrase. Okay? Or Mary is fond of English novels, fond of to be like, right? To like. So you can say, and Sam is so too. So fond of English novels, like that. So too indicates that the substitution is okay. So the whole thing that I underline is an adjective phrase, like that. Okay? We'll leave it, maybe it's not a good place to end, but there is no choice. So I'll leave it here for this chapter of syntax, and next time we'll come back and do a little bit of a review for the substitution test here, and we'll do a review for our midterm exam next time. Okay. And over this weekend, I will send by email. I'll send the answer key for the first homework and the second homework. Okay, in case you want to do a review to prepare for the midterm. Okay.